So if you are in the dark and the trenches, know that there is hope, there is resources available to be able to do that, but it takes consistent effort on your part, even when that child is in resistance of it. Keep doing those day-to-day things. I call them daily directions, right?
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by SRanker Marketing, because in a world where SEO can feel so overwhelming, you need an effortless way to attract more customers. You need it to be budget friendly, and you need clear reporting. That's all that SRanker Marketing does for you. In fact, they can do it in as little as 3 months. So head over to SRanker.com, check out my homies over there, get involved with their program, especially if you're a local business. Remember, the best way to support this podcast is by supporting our sponsors. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Phrozen Softserve here in Utah. They service everywhere from Ogden to Nephi, and the best part is they make rentals super easy. They bring in the Softserve for you, the machines, they pack it out, and then enjoy their 7 flavors of Dole Whip and all of the Softserve that you can eat. It's great for businesses, customer appreciation, and employee appreciation days. And the best part is you don't have to do anything except call them and reserve it. So go to frozensoftserve.com. That's Frozen with a PH. Check out the link in the description of this podcast episode. And thank you so much for listening. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Elysia. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
When I saw your post on Connect Utah, it kind of struck a chord with me. I've read quite a few books, and I have a lot of friends around this subject. Like do you know Carolyn Williams by any chance?
I don't.
She did an undercover substitute teacher. She is also like a social worker, right, or whatever. And she went in and did undercover substitute teaching to like learn more about kids and stuff. And I was like, whoa, she's got some wild stories.
Well, I was in the classroom for
you were in
almost 14 years.
Yeah. What grades did you teach?
So I mainly taught 9th grade English.
Okay.
And then, but I did teach all grades in junior high.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay. Now, the reason that I brought you on was you mentioned something that I've always tried to tackle, but I feel like I have to be really careful how you tackle it, right? Which is the balance between resilience and accountability and like owning your own story, and the flip side of that, which is like, there is a problem with bullying. There is a problem with, social media. Like, these things are real. These obstacles are real. And so your post kind of, got me thinking. And so I just want to ask the big question right up front. Like, we'll just dive right in. How do you balance that? How do you balance the resilience and accountability along with like, yeah, these things are really happening to you and they're really shitty?
Well, I think it is a balancing act, right? Because if you go one way too far to being victim, right? Being victim mode, blaming everybody for everything that is happening. And while there are many things that are outside of our control, there are certain things that we can control, and that's our mindset. And so no matter what happens, whether it is because you did or said something that initiated that, or because it just happened and it was a product of circumstance, you still need to take responsibility from where you go moving forward. So I relate a lot of things back to Hero's Journey. And with that, let me just give a little background. So Hero's Journey, you're called on an adventure, whether you want to or not. Along the way, you're going to have challenges, trials, tribulations. You're going to have friends. You're going to have foes. You're going to have monsters, right?
Yeah.
These things that you're going to have to go through. There's going to be a time where you want to just hide in that cave and be like, I don't want to do this. I didn't sign up for this. This sucks. I don't want to do this. But you're not going to stay that victim of whatever has happened, because you know that you have more to give. You have more to do. And so it is coming out of that circumstance, rising above those challenges with resilience. And resilience is your ability to move forward and through something. It's not bouncing back, because bouncing back means you're going to try and be that same person you were before. And the reality is that when things happen that shift your thinking, or are those micro or those macro traumas, you can't be that same person again. And so through that hero's journey, through the resilience of it, you rise up braver, stronger, and more courageous to face that next challenge and really take an accountability of to what your role is or was in that situation. And more importantly, where do you go from here? What are you going to do now? And like you said, there's tons of things that play into the life experiences that our teens, our kids are facing right now. And there's many of those that are out of our control as parents of knowing what
that's tough.
they are experiencing, but we've got to do better in communication to help navigate through those things.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the hero's journey. I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell. I've read the Hero with 1,000 Faces. And that's also why I thought it was really interesting, your kind of take on that, because it kind of encapsulates that whole journey of a teenager, right? Because you mentioned that's part of the hero's journey is the reluctance to the call. You're like, I don't want to do this, man. Like, I'm too young. I'm not, you would like, this isn't my job. I think that's a big one that I hear sometimes. It's like, like, why me? Or like, why do I have to do this? Like, I'm just 13 or whatever, right? And you're like, man, I totally get it. But I also think that's the best gift that you can give as a parent, because I have children, right? And it's like, I'm not always going to be there. And so you have to have like the tools to do whatever you need to do, right? Because it's just so hard.
Well, it is. And the thing is that a lot of parents, so I was in the classroom for a long time, and parents wanted to come in and solve all the problems for their kids. They wanted to plow the path. And, that we used to call them like lawnmower, and then it's like helicopter. And right now, a lot of the parents, it's snowblower. All right. So where it's like, we're just plowing the whole path, where we don't want our kids to struggle with anything.
Right.
But that doesn't help them, because if you think back on your life, those things that shaped you into who you are today and why you're doing what you're doing are because of those obstacles that you had to find that grit, that determination to say, I'm going to do something different. And we're not with our kids a lot of times. I've got 3 kids as well. So I've got mine are older. I've got an 18-year-old. I have a almost 16-year-old, and then a 12-year-old. So 2 boys and a girl. And, we want our kids not to struggle, but it's in the struggle that they actually find their strength to decide whether this is what I want to do or what I don't want to do.
Yeah, that was I'm a young parent, but every once in a while, just because of the podcast and things like that, I get a question that's like, what's the hardest thing about parenting? And it's the same answer every time. It's like letting go, like watching your kids have like suffer, because you can't, it's not like, sometimes in high school sports, the coach will be like, I can't put pads on and go out there and do it for you. And it's not like because he won't or doesn't want to, it's because he literally like can't, like there's no way, you know what I mean? It's just not possible. And so that is a super hard thing to realize. And also to like teach your kids, you're like, dude, I can't, this one, you gotta, but you're right though. Cause I had a pretty hard childhood coming up, and and like we lived in a poor town in Iowa, and like all of these things that you're like, I don't want my kids to go through that, but you're like, well, if it's not that, it's something else.
Yeah. There will always be something. It may not be the same situation and circumstance, but all of us experience the same emotions.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't happen in the same way. But one thing we all have in common is that we're going to have challenges. We're going to have things that are complex in their own different ways of how we navigate through those. And then we've got to decide, are we going to persevere through this, or are we going to, play the blame game? It's a lot easier to blame someone else for situations of why this or why that in your life. But ultimately, you've got to decide where, like I said before, where am I going from here? This happened. I can't change the past. I can't change that situation. But what do I do moving forward through this?
How do those conversations go with teenagers? Like when you bring that up, I feel like that would be a tough conversation.
Well, you've got to build that trust. And a lot of times that trust is built by the smaller conversations. Okay. So a lot of parents, They do have a hard time talking to their kids about these things. One of the big things that I encourage parents to do is to, by Gary Chapman's The Five Love Languages
Oh,
of
yes.
children,
Oh, of children.
of
Okay.
children, because if we're trying our best as parents, right, to love them in the ways that maybe we wanted to be loved as a child,
Mm-hmm.
but that might not be how they feel loved. And so really finding out how they feel loved, their personality, what they like to do, and really investing in making that relationship a priority with your kid.
Mm-hmm.
Our kids don't want to spend every waking minute with us, but
Mm-hmm.
when we're with them, they want our undivided attention for that, whether it's 5 minutes of coloring if you've got your little kids with you, whether it's going on a walk or going to play baseball.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Or going, my boy is a kicker for football. And so we go to the field and we practice that. We shag the balls, or we're walking around,
Yeah.
the track, and doing those things, knowing they're supported, knowing they're loved because they exist, not because they did X, Y, and Z,
Mm-hmm.
but that they're part of your life. And so really it's building that trust day after day.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are some hard conversations that need to be had, one of the big things that I suggest to a lot of the clients that I work with is doing a walk and talk. So if it's a hard conversation, because us looking at each other in the eyes, that's fine when we're talking about things. But if it's like oh, I might be in trouble, or, hey, I need to really talk to you about some hard things, then walking, you're in movement, you're resetting your brain waves, and you're moving.
Yeah. That's really cool. That's a good way to think about it. I'm probably going to start doing walks now. We go on quite a bit of walks, but it's always funny. My daughter's fiery. She's so cool. How did those parents go, or how did the conversations go with the parents?
With the parents,
Is it a little bit harder?
it is a little bit harder. And my business partner, she's like, I don't know how you do that with talking to the parents, because the kids will come to me and say, hey, I'm feeling attacked by my parents. They're not listening. They're not, I feel like I'm in judgment, right? Being judged by my parent, that they're telling me who to be, what to say, how to act, all of these different things. And so I was actually on a podcast with Dr. Doug, and we were talking about some different things. And what he told me a few weeks ago was, when you get into a conversation, you need to ask, do you want me to be here to listen?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you want me to be here to listen and respond? So talking with the parents about, hey, here's what's happening. Here's what your child let me know about this. I would like to hear your perspective, because we all have different perspectives and paradigms.
Right, right.
And the eyes in which we're seeing our kids doing stuff is not the same way our kids are viewing what's happening. And so we've got to kind of remember that as parents, to ask that. Like, that's a huge mindset shift, is going, okay, do I just need to be here to show up and listen? Or am I going to be talking to the kid about it, having the response?
Mm-hmm.
And lots of times right now, I mean, the mental health struggles with the adults is more severe than it is with the kids.
Yeah, yeah.
So in Utah, we have, let's see, we're at highest with mental health struggles, highest with opioid usage. And then we're ranked 14 right now. That's the newest stats that came out. We have roughly around 650 people take their life each year due to suicide.
Is that in a certain age group, or is that
that's
total?
That's total.
Yeah, that's still scary. But I was just curious, because I know that youth, those numbers are a little bit higher than
with
adults.
the youth, it is the number one cause of death for ages 10 to 24.
That blows my mind.
We've had kids as young as 7 take their life, even this year.
I was in a school district in Foxborough. Yeah, that was really sad. In my daughter's elementary school, that was sad.
It was at your daughter's school.
Mm-hmm. The young girl who, I think she was like 7. Yeah, I think that's what you're talking about. Someone, it was super scary.
Yeah.
As a parent, we were all like so confused. We were like, what the heck is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I actually get that and can relate to that. So my oldest, he's 18, but when he was 7, 8 years old, he wanted to take his life. And so that really was kind of the first thing where I came home from the classroom and I came home to save my own son's life. And we implemented all of the things that I've just been talking about. And it took, honestly, about a year to 2 years before I asked my husband, I'm like, is this even working? Are we making any changes in his life, letting him know that he's loved, he's seen, he's valued, he's appreciated? And that boy who's 18 now, going off to play college football, still comes in my room every night and says, Mom, will you tickle my back? Mom, will you scratch my back? He's the first to say, I love you. So if you are in the dark and the trenches, know that there is hope, there is resources available to be able to do that, but it takes consistent effort on your part, even when that child is in resistance of it. Keep doing those day-to-day things. I call them daily directions, right? Moving that needle, moving and taking that step, because you're always one step, one decision away from a completely different life. And most people give up right before they're about to succeed, or right before that light starts to shine just a little bit brighter.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that story. I know that's so hard.
Yeah,
yeah, that's so hard. I worked in the suicide hotline.
Okay.
And saw quite a bit of that, and like had a lot of people come through. And that was, but what you mentioned was what they taught us though, is like, we're not there. Actually, they told us specifically, you're not problem solvers. Actually, they said specifically, don't do any of that. You just listen. You get 30. And the other crazy thing, what a lot of people don't know, is like we had a time limit. So we only had 30 minutes. And it couldn't go, like, it was rare that it went over 30, 45 minutes. Because what's crazy was like, if you did it right in the beginning, all you needed was like a 30 or 45 minute conversation, and then to take somebody from hot to cold.
Yeah.
That was crazy to me. And so like, which is also another hard one. It's just like parents letting go, right? Like you just want to stay in front of your kid and talk to him for hours, right? But at some point you got to like, anyway, it's wild though.
Yeah. Well, and you've got to let them decide
Yeah.
that they want to do something different, that what they have been doing is going to continue to get to the same results. And it is important to reach out to the hotline. We're so grateful that we have that we have 988, right? That these kids, these families can call in crisis to be able to really share their emotions and their experiences on what's happening.
And when you talk about these kind of things with children and, the youth and dying by suicide and some of these things, what are there any like major players in the decisions? Are there anything that like that you say stay away from? Or I mean, obviously you said quite a few things to like embrace and like do. Are there anything like, I guess what I'm asking is like, how do you feel about social media and kids? How do you feel about tech and kids? Because obviously that's not the only thing, right? I mean, your story was a prime example of that. Like we didn't have this 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
It just didn't exist in this scale. So, but I'm wondering now, like, what are your thoughts on kind of that realm?
Okay. I think a big disconnect is that we have lost connection and real communication. Yeah. So we go to the phones, right? We have a way to be more connected anywhere in the world with anyone at any given moment, but we are more alone than we used to be. And when the world changed, it opened the gates of everything where we were supposed to be separated. We're supposed to stay separate. And I don't think we've really figured out a way to get back to that. With the kids on technology, yeah, they're getting them young and they're not aware of the messaging, of the language, of the effects that are happening. They're also hearing so many different messages from many different places that they aren't able to identify what's true, what's not, and to really research or understand how it's affecting their mental capacity and their growth. So yes, we have problems with the technology and utilizing that. However, the technology, it's not going away.
Right.
It's not going away. So again, I'm going to come back to the communication. Are you talking with kids about what they're seeing, what they're watching, what they're experiencing? Because even if your child is not on that, when they go to school, there are kids who have the phones, they're exposed, they're learning things. My 12-year-old knows things I didn't know until I was married.
Dude, yeah, the access to information is crazy.
Yes.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And I think there's, I appreciate that answer because it's kind of like everything. And one lesson that I learned when we were going through being a crisis volunteer was actually there was no correlation or whatever you want to call it between like, I guess the stat was, bringing up suicide doesn't cause suicide.
Right.
Which I thought was crazy. I remember reading this article in the Wall Street Journal where like there was you get these suicide clusters every once in a while. I remember reading an article in there and how the article mentioned like nobody would talk about it. And I'm like, that's, what are you talking about? Like, you know, so like, yeah, you just like bring it up with your kids. You just like, you know, you probably saw this online. Let's chat about it. Right. Like it just takes the stigma and all the fear away from, oh, mom and dad know about that. Yeah, they know about that.
Well, and the thing is that, because that's one of the biggest myths is that if you talk about it, then all of a sudden someone's going to think about taking their life. And if they've been thinking about it, that thought's already there.
Yeah.
By you bringing it up, you actually open up a safe space for them to talk about it, because there's direct and indirect ways to ask things. And directly, if you're worried about someone, you come out and you say, have you been thinking about taking your life? You ask them that question. And if it's a yes, then what you want to do, it's called QPR. I don't know if that's what you're trained in as well.
I can't remember, but it's probably something. Yeah, it's probably similar.
So it goes over, and there are free trainings with this across the state, across the nation. It's question, persuade, and refer. And this is a lot of the work that I did inside of schools and training kids specifically to look for those, how to question someone directly or indirectly, how to refer them, and how to persuade them to get the help that they need. Because we're not the ones, like you said, in charge of solving that problem for them.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, I can't solve anyone's problem for them. At the end of the day, you've got to solve your own problems, but you may need some help in figuring out the solutions to get the answers or the results that you're wanting.
Yeah. Is that a tough pill for some people to swallow? Do you ever bring that up? Do you ever you're like, look, let's chat, but you got to know, like, if you're here because you think I'm going to solve anything, it's probably not. You know what I mean? Do you ever have those kind of conversations?
Yeah. Because my big thing, and it goes with my book, become the hero of your own story.
Yeah.
Right? I want to empower people that they truly do have the capabilities within. Sometimes it's just going to take some time to build upon that, to really go, oh, wait, I don't have to solve it all overnight. Right? It's working through those things. It's finding those steps, those things that are going to work, that are going to bring more joy, bring more hope into your life. Because if you're looking for an overnight fix, you're not going to find it.
Yeah. And I don't think it's supposed to be an overnight fix either. Like, I don't think it would do anything, right? Like, you know, it's kind of like the example I give all the time, and this is a very generalized example, but like, how many millionaires are still millionaires after they win the lottery? The answer is none. So it's a very clear indication of like, you cannot, you know what I mean? It's the same way with people's minds. Like, even if I could, it wouldn't work. Like, because you have to go through the steps. Like, you have to learn how to manage money. You have to learn how to like work and save it. Then you have to learn how to invest it. And that's just, but the same thing, right? Like with your emotions, right? Like, you got to learn how to like manage those, and you got to learn like who you can be around and who you can't be around. And you got to, unfortunately, you got to get punched in the face a couple of times to learn like, I probably shouldn't be around you, right? Like, and that's just tough. Like, how do you help people? How do you help teens, especially, like expand their vision? You know what I mean? Like, more long-term, because, you know, I think we all remember in high school it was super tunnel. Like, this is all that's ever going to be, right? And you're like, well,
yeah. Well, and that's the reality. The kids right now, and just like we were, right? It's tunnel vision that this is the biggest thing happening in my life right now. And it is for those kids, just like it was for us.
Yeah.
Even though times have changed with things. But the big thing is becoming aware, all right, of how you're feeling. And I do a mindset scale, all right, like from destructive to, okay, I'm feeling this way. I'm angry. I want to punch someone. I want to destroy it. I want to blame someone for making X, Y, and Z happen. All right. Pretending it doesn't exist, to moving to more of the positive of going, okay, I can fix, maybe this is just a quick fix, a Band-Aid fix, to moving to how can this transform me to use this as a way to move forward. Okay. Instead of blaming it, how am I going to use this to transform? And you brought up another great thing that I always talk to kids about, and it's Jim Rohn, who says you're a combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So you're going to pick up on their positive and their negative qualities, whether you like to or not.
Right.
So it's important that you figure out, okay, who am I spending time with, and how do I feel after spending time with this person? If I do not feel better about myself after being with someone, then it's okay to choose a different playground, is how I word it for kids, right? Because we all remember going down those slides as kids, and there was someone who's being a jerk or climbing up the slide, and we're like, no, you either go down or I'm going to a different one. It's okay to choose a different playground, even as adults. And one of the big things is for us to model that for our kids, to model healthy friendships, to model healthy communication, relationships, boundaries of what you will and won't allow into your life. And obviously this takes time and it takes work. And, you know, I didn't get here overnight. And I don't think there's anything that is ever, you know, fully healed with anything that we go through. We're always working and learning and trying to grow and figure things out.
Well, yeah, that's the cool thing about, just like the journey anyway. And like, so I'm Polynesian, I'm Hawaiian specifically. And so like tattoos are a big part of us. And, you know, the tattooing process is kind of weird for the body because like it's foreign. And typically when your body has a foreign substance, it gets rid of it, except like ink for some reason. And so it's just like that scarring. And the earth does the same thing, right? Like that's what mountains are. And so that's what I always try to, like, if I ever have a conversation with a kid, I'm like, look, dude, like we live in Utah around some of the most beautiful mountains in the world. And like, they got here because it was complete chaos until now we just go hang out at them. Right. And it's the same tattooing. Like, the New Zealand, the Maori call it moko, which is, scarring, which is like how we are with the earth anyway. But it's just like these symbols that help you remind people that like, yeah, dude, it's just going to suck. And that's, it's just,
there are parts of it that do, you know, and talking about storms and forming the mountains or, you know, creating symbolism with tattoos, right? There are going to be storms to get the rainbows.
Yeah. And
right.
Yeah. And I like, so I always say that I was a fan of Stoicism before it was cool, but that's kind of like what it is, right? It's like, you know, what stands in the way becomes the way. And you just have to keep going because, and all the cliches work. And that's the other thing. They're true though. But you know what else is funny about that is like, I also tell people who are struggling about excuses. I'm like, excuses taste so good because they're real. You know what I mean? Like that kid did push you down. I did whatever, you know what I mean? I did grow up in a rough neighborhood or in a rough school or in a rough family. My mom was this, my dad was that. Like, yeah, dude, it's all true. But like, you know what I mean?
But what story are you going to continue to relive over and over again and tell you about who you get to become now? Because there are so many adults and where people, you know, they wouldn't blame you for living a mediocre life or doing all of these things based on some of the traumas that you had in your past. And that's the thing that we've got to shift is that we need to stop kind of letting people not rise to their potential and their capabilities because of things. I feel like lots of times we let people live in that victim mentality because of situations. There's been plenty of times where I could easily have given up, and people wouldn't blame me.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
That's the thing. Yeah. You're just like, yeah, dude, you know, somebody go, this was really hard. Yep. Guess you probably shouldn't. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, easy, right? It's the easy way or the hard way.
Yeah. So, well, speaking of symbolism, like I want to chat about what
talk
these
about
shoes,
I was actually going to ask you
shoes
about
are,
that.
you know, so it's on my book. So become the hero of your own story. And they're not just red shoes. So red symbolizes brave, bold, passion, power, love. All right. Also, with these shoes, they symbolize hope and freedom, perseverance in every step of your journey. So everything ties to hero's journey, right? One decision, one direction, and taking that step every single day to become who you're meant to be, even if that step is hard. And even if sometimes it's 2 steps backwards and then 1 step forward, because truly those obstacles are put there not to get in your way, but they're there for you to figure out the way.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that too, is you mentioned like the hero's journey. What's cool about the hero's journey is it's someone's own journey. So you can't say like what hero was better, like Hercules or Perseus, right? Because you're like, well, it's not like that's, you know what I mean? It's not even a question that you are allowed to ask, because I mean, you get what I'm saying, but like, yeah, because they're just different, right? Like, but what's cool about that too, is I always talk about that in the hero's journey. And what's really cool about the hero's journey is the resurrection. Like when you come back, like the hero comes back with all of the knowledge and everything, kind of like you were mentioning earlier, like you can't come back the same person. Like you're not going to, after you get bullied, you can't, there's no coming back. And so you come back as however you want to be resurrected, which I think is pretty cool symbolism. Like it's up to you.
It is up to you. And I think a lot feel like they don't have the capabilities to do that. And so one of the big shifts that I'm trying to help is to get the kids, the parents, and the teachers speaking the same language, learning these things at a younger age of resilience, that you're capable of doing these things, of working through those obstacles, those challenges that arise. Because like we talked about earlier, we can't just get rid of those as much as we want to get rid of those hurts and not let our kids suffer. But they've got to do that to become who they're meant to be, to write their story of what childhood brought to them and where they're going to go from it.
Yeah. And that's it. We keep touching on that, but it's so important for people to realize that it is part of your story. That like, I always, you know, there's the Stoic piece of it, which is like, you know, and the Buddhist piece, which is like, you're trying to separate something that can't be separated, right? Like you're just like, this is part of your story, whether you like it or not, like, and it has to be. And so what's funny is I've been doing this podcast for over 3 years. I've interviewed over 280 people, you know what I mean? Just almost 300.
Yeah.
And everybody, all the business owners say the same thing. And it's like, it was so hard in the beginning. And then I used to ask, would you do it any differently? And the answer is always no. Because I had to do it. Like what you're going through right now has to be part of who, you know what I mean? It's like people are trying to reject part of this story. And it's like, you know what I mean? You're trying to like move a mountain that can't be moved.
Well, and you got to do it piece by piece, right? And lots of times, you know, owning my own business, leaving the classroom and then jumping into running my own business, doing a nonprofit foundation, I'm learning those things, but that's what stretches you outside of your comfort zone. You know, the growth is outside of it. And I actually learned from a 6th grader. I was in a classroom for doing some different achievement stuff. And a little 6th grader says, well, I think we just need to stretch outside of our comfort zone, you know, because so many people say step outside your comfort zone. Well, what if we looked at it as an elastic band where we're just going to do a little bit of stretch? We're going to stretch until that expands. So instead of stepping all the way out, this is a 12-year-old girl who taught me that. And I'm just going to keep on repeating it because it's really so eye-opening. And a great analogy, right?
Yeah.
To go, let's just stretch a little bit.
Because that's probably more real life.
Yeah.
It's like, you never just like, I don't know. I've never personally met somebody who just jumped out of the boat with 2 feet. Typically it's like, there's some prep going in there. Right. I don't know. Everybody, right. Like there was something like I interviewed the co-founder of Mobetta's who started the first store in Bountiful, and he quit his job and jumped in. But I mean, he had all of the prep work. And what was cool about his story was everything at Mobetta's that you eat there is what he ate growing up and what he cooked for his family. Right. So it's like, yeah, you just kind of like go with what you know, and all right, well, if I can make this for them, I can and that's the stretching that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And there are some big leaps.
There's
that's
big stretches.
One of my favorite books is actually called The Big Leap by Gay Hendrick. Have you read that?
No. Mm-mm.
So in this, he talks about there's different zones. All right. There's your zone of incompetence where it's just, you're not good at it. Okay. Yeah. There's your zone of competence. And then there's your zone of excellence. Okay. So where you're probably better than most people. And then your zone of genius, where you're living your life to the fullest, you're making an impact, and you're lit up about what you're doing every single day. Most people actually stay in the zone of competence, okay, where just above incompetence, all right, where okay, I don't like doing this, but it's an easier path. Right. And then I always think of Robert Frost, Two Roads Diverged in a Wood, and I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Most people are too scared to leave the comfortable and the known to travel into the unknown territories, to take that hero's journey and go, but what if? What if? And are you okay if I share one of the big parts of my big leap?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this, as you know, I was in the classroom from 2008 to 2022. So I just left this last year. This is my first school year not being there. And there's definitely some emotions that go with that, but I wouldn't change it. However, what was the catalyst of why I left the classroom was November 2021, my dad had actually come into the school as Veterans Day, and he's a Vietnam vet. And so at the school, they did a flag ceremony. A bunch of veterans came in, welcomed the kids. And we did that, said the pledge in a few different classes. And then he ended up coming back later that afternoon with my mom. My son was actually in my class, and then my niece as well. My sister-in-law was at the school too, but he came back to talk to the kids about being a hero and learning about their heroes. And during his presentation, he just looked at me and he goes, "Leash, I'm feeling a little dizzy." And I said, "Dad, do you need to sit in my chair?" And he said, "I think that'd be a good idea." And so I scooted my teacher chair over, and my dad sat in that chair and took his last breaths. So we got him down to the ground. Yeah. So my hero, an American hero, the hero of my life, my dad, took his last breaths in my arms in my classroom. And I call it a beautifully tragic day because there are things that I feel that were divinely guided that prepared us for that. He was surrounded by family. He had been an English teacher as well and an administrator. He was in a classroom doing what he loved, talking about his love of country. And I haven't actually mentioned this one before, but I feel like I want to share this story of one of the last stories that he shared was talking about how he met my mom. And she was standing there, and he looked over at her and just pointed to her and says, "And there she is. That's the love of my life." And all of those kids, just went, the sweetest thing. But to know that my mom heard him say how much he loved her in the last moments.
Wow.
was so beautiful. And earlier that morning, my mom had written a Facebook post about how my dad was her hero. So it closed that circle of it. And now, do I wish he was still here? Absolutely. But if he was here, I would not be full force doing what I'm doing, because it was easy for me to teach. It was easy for me to stay in the classroom. I knew I was making a difference. I could do that over and over again, and I had, right? But I had this idea of how I could truly duplicate some things and give these kids these skills, these tools in all schools and starting at a younger age, so that we're not just living in crisis all the time and thinking everything's an emergency, but building them with foundational tools of things. Like, had I not experienced the most tragic and honestly the hardest thing I've ever been through, we wouldn't be sitting here right now.
That's insane. So was it in front of a class?
Yeah, there were about 40 kids there.
Whoa.
And
how do you deal with that?
Well,
while you're that just feels like, whoa, that's a lot.
It was a lot, but
it must have been so hard.
Here's the thing. Yes, and I was very calm and in control, because I'm trained that those kids there are in my protection, right?
Yeah.
They're in my protection. And so I was calm. My mom was not. She was running inside and outside of the classroom saying that we need CPR. We need help. I had a student hit the panic button. And my sister-in-law was there. So she called 911. And then I had 2 teen heroes in my classroom that day. As my mom was saying, we need help, we need CPR, I had this brave girl say, Miss Butler, I can do this. So she gave my dad CPR. And then I had another brave girl say, and I can count the cadence. So when I was in the hardest part of my life, in that cave, right? I had people show up for me. These kids, these teens who could step in, but they knew I believed in them and I trusted them, honestly, with all my life and with my father's life, right? To be able to do that. And they were awarded some hero medals for doing that. And I will forever remember those girls for the rest of my life for being heroes of my story and helping me to get through those moments.
Yeah. And that's crazy. And then you think about like bringing it all home, like thinking about all the kids in there who, and you and everybody part of that experience that's like, none of us wanted this, none of us asked for it, but here we are. And like, you know what I mean? And so it's just kind of that's a cool kind of thought exercise that I was thinking about while you were talking, just like, yeah, that's the real life of everything that you're teaching, was that real life right there.
And it was. And, I took some time off because it was right before Thanksgiving. I don't think I went back. I think maybe a couple times in December. And then I ended up going part-time. But for me to walk through those doors,
yeah, it was tough.
Was hard every single day. And I didn't think I could do it, but I did it. And that was honestly me figuring out, can I be resilient? Can I truly teach these kids what I've been talking to them about for years? Can I show them real life resilience? And I did, but I also did that because I knew my 14-year-old son and niece, and then I also had a 7th grade niece there too, that they had to walk through those doors every single day.
Yeah.
Every day. And those kids who were there with me, it was a loss for them as well. But I do know that I went back. There is one sweet, sweet girl that I know I went back to be able to save her life. And she's written me multiple times since saying, had you not been there, I was planning on taking my life that day. But I drove that girl home because I knew, and I'm not the normal teacher. I'm just not. There's rules, and then there's lives that matter more than any rules. And that's what I did. I took care of those kids in my class first and foremost above any academic anything, because if they don't believe in themselves and don't want to be here tomorrow, what does that report card even matter?
Yeah. What is it? Yeah. What are we doing if we can't actually do something?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the struggle, right? Well, not really a struggle, but I guess some of the mental struggle for some people. And that's what they get caught up in, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, well, at some point you got to just move on, or like carry people with you and like take people with you.
Well, you do, because otherwise, if you want to sit in the dark will let you sit there all day with it.
Yeah.
It will let you stay there. But you got to find that shimmer of hope, that shimmer of light, that just one moment, one thing, one person, one highlight, and hold on to that. Go to those people who bring inspiration and hope and light in your life. It is a sign of courage and bravery to ask for the help that you need. I haven't been able to do this alone. I've gone to therapy. I have coaches. For a while, I did have to take depression, anxiety medication. I'm not anymore, because I've worked through those things with a professional to be able to go, okay, I needed those for that time being, because that was just
you
hard.
just got to get the baseline. Yeah. And then
yes.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of people depend on that to just feel normal, right?
Yeah.
And to get, and here's the other thing where you brought to baseline, right? A lot of the medical field, the mental health, they just want people to get to baseline. Right. I don't feel baseline is good enough.
I agree.
I want you to rise to your highest potential to do that.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to be proactive about things. We need to have that empowerment and focus on the positive psychology of things, that we can rise above that air quote normal. There's no normal, right? There's no normal.
What's funny about the medication that you brought up, and what I always say is like, those were never meant to be taken long term. From everything that I've read, like ADHD medicine, anxiety, depression, like those things were meant for a little bit so you could work through it, so that you could do it on your own and you wouldn't need that. But like they would help you get there, you would do the rest, and then after you took them, you would just keep going, right? That's what blows my mind, is that some people, like I don't know, whoever's prescribing these just thinks, we'll just until whatever.
And that goes back to the quick fix, right?
Yeah, that's true.
People want the quick fix. They want the easier path. But the path that is going to truly transform your life is honestly the one that most people do not travel down. It's taking the responsibility. It goes back to what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
If you truly want to be free, then commit to living the life you were meant to live.
And how I always pitch that was, because I'm a salesperson, but you know what I mean? I always pitch that with like, you may not be, and I read it in a book. Have you ever read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson? It's a great book. He illustrates in that book, you may not be accountable, but you are responsible. Yeah. Like it wasn't your fault, but here we are.
Now, now here we are. So now what are you going to do?
Now we got to do.
What are we going to do? How are we going to move forward, move through this and find the support that you need to navigate it? Yeah.
I love that book. Is probably one of the best self-help books I've ever read, for sure. And then, because he talks about the story too, it's like, there's two sides to every story. There's what actually happened, and there's what you tell yourself about what actually happened. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think that's the first step of truth, is like awareness of like seeing things for what they really are. That's the first step of like that philosophical truth or whatever, right? Yeah,
you've got to become aware and figure out.
Yeah.
You got to be honest with yourself too. I think a lot of it is we're not being honest with ourselves, because lots of times we're wearing these masks out in front of other people, being who everyone else expects us to be. And then we're not even sure when we come back and are alone, like, well, wait a minute, who am I really? Who do I want to be?
Yeah. Well, and here's the last question, or the last topic, because you've been great. The idea that like somebody, how do I want to ask this question? It's the idea that you're essentially you're just not okay with like where you're at. And like these kids are like, I think I want this. And I don't know how you navigate. Like, I think I want this. And you're like, man, it's not because I'm not philosophically telling you I know what's going to happen. Like I'm actually like, like what you did. And so like, it's just so hard to like balance that with some kids. Cause I'm always like thinking about it and I'm like, dude, like, I know you think that will make you happy, whatever that means. Right. But I promise that sometimes you just got to let them run or.
Yeah. Well, do you listen to Ed Milet? And
I heard him speak a few times.
Okay. So I actually did, recently here in Davis County when he was here, but he has
were you at the Limitless?
I was.
Yeah. I was Dirty Dough.
Okay.
We were guys passing out the cookies.
Okay. So we were that we've crossed paths before and here we are again.
There you go.
And, what he does this analogy of imagine that you are in a mansion. It's 100-room mansion.
Yeah.
But you are only staying in one room. You're not even experiencing or looking into possibilities of what's beyond that door because you're thinking in these narrow perspectives, these paradigms of what should be or what other people think should be for you. Well, there's 100 rooms to explore, 100 possibilities, 100 ways in which you could go into a door and you could say, no, not for me, right? But you could go into one and you could find that maybe what you never even thought was possible was waiting for you to either knock or to open the door to those possibilities.
Yeah. And just telling that to a kid, because you just like, look, there's so many other things that we can do and so many other ways that we can do it. But I also, one of the things that I really enjoyed, I do a lot of like combat sports. So like we're obviously in a boxing play, right? But I do jujitsu. And one of the cool things that I've always said is like, there's something sacred about getting your ass kicked. Like I use that intentionally too, because I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah. Well, but there comes a point, at least in my life where I'm like, I'm done letting that happen.
Yeah.
Or at least when I recognize the patterns as to when it's going to result in that happening for me, I make a shift. I make a pivot. You can change, or, maybe I put a guard up. Yeah. Right. Or I duck around. Yeah. Or, I figure out how to punch them. Yeah. Right. But those who really figure things out, we've gotten beaten up.
Yeah, for sure.
We've been beat up.
Yeah.
And many people have, maybe not to the same degrees as other, but we understand loss and grief.
Yeah, but that's why I put my kids in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Because it's just like
you learn.
Well, you just got to get beat up. Yeah. And it's good for me too, because I can't do anything. I can't run out on the mat and stop all of this. Like you've got to just go through it. And so that's why I like sports, or like any kind of competitive anything. So like, because I feel like you can learn the same thing, and whether you're doing like music or cheer, whatever, it doesn't have to be the sports, but man, I just love the idea that you can lose.
Well, and we need to know that we can lose, and we need to lose to know that we want to win.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, because I always tell, I always do the stoic thought exercise, which is like, you go over every worst case scenario, right? So like if I go out and like I just did a boxing match, if I go box this guy, what's the worst thing that could happen to me? Probably the worst thing that could happen to me is I get knocked out in front of 3,000 people, including my wife and kids and everybody who loves me, right? That's the worst thing that could happen. And then you sit with that for a minute and you're like, well, if that's the worst thing that could happen, I'm probably going to wake up on Monday and go to work and nobody's going to remember it in a week. So if that is actually the worst thing that could happen, then what happens if I win though? Right. Then like what happens if I make it? And so going through that exercise of like, what's the worst thing that could happen changes the question for me from it changes it from why not to like, or like, I'm going to fail to what if I make it? Like, what what if I don't to what if I do?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I love like where most people get stuck is thinking about that worst case scenario.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
And
they don't make that.
spiral
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
And you pointed out a good thing because you gotta take it to, okay, here's worst case, but here's best case.
Yeah.
Here's best case. And I'm gonna give it all I got to do that.
Right. And so actually that's how I make my investments or business moves. I go like, all right, so if it's $100, I go, if I never saw this $100 ever again, would I still be happy? Would it still be worth it for me? And if I say yes, then I'm all in. And then I go all in because it's like, I've got nothing to lose. Like it's already gone. And then you get like, yeah.
And you bring up such a great point. Most people are not all in on their own lives.
Right.
Most people are not all in on their choices, their decisions, and where they want to go. And so really getting clear.
Yeah, well, I just do that with worst case. Like if we did a business deal, it was about 10K, and I just looked at my wife and I was like, if we never get this 10K back, would we be cool? And she was like, it would suck not to have 10K, but I guess so. And it's like, cool, then that means we're in, because once it's gone, it's gone. Yeah. And if we get it back, sweet. If we don't, we knew it, right? There's nothing crazy. And I think that people get caught up in the fear because they don't just like, that's the worst thing that could ever happen is I lose 10K. Yeah. That's, and like, I don't know, I work every day. So like, I'll get it back eventually, through myself or whatever. But if I can be like, I lost it, like it's already gone, then I'm all in, right? Because I don't need anything. Like if this works, sweet. If it doesn't, sweet, then you know what I mean? And so, but people, I think I don't think it's that true story, right? Like that's actually the absolute worst thing that could happen to me in that boxing match was I get knocked out. You're not going to die. None of that's real. So, well, shit, then let's do it.
Yeah. And I would just say go all in on yourself.
Yeah. Because now what if it does work?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, shit, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like, that's it. And that's what I teach my kids. I'm like, look, if you ride down this hill on your bike without a helmet or whatever, like if you ride down this hill, worst thing that happens, you're going to fall. You might get beat up, a little bruised, but if you make it, that'll be freaking sick. Go ahead.
Yeah.
But then they go like, well, maybe I could get hurt. Yeah. Like I think getting hurt's okay. Yep. And then that's a cool thing to see in my son's head. It's a little dangerous. We're safe. Okay.
Well, and you've got to make the risk.
Yeah. You've got to do
reward.
Yeah. You got to.
Right. Like because a lot of people are just on this merry-go-round, right? Like where it's the same thing, same pattern, same stuff. Like I want to go on the roller coaster, with some twists and some turns and some challenges and some, throwing in the money. Yeah. Are we all in on this? Yes. Okay. We may go upside down and then we may rise up again. And it's all part of the ride. It's all part of the ride.
Yeah. And I tell people that too. They're like, they come to me sometimes for investment advice and I'm like, are you okay with never getting that back? If the answer is no, then you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be second guessing. It's going to be miserable for you every second of the way. But if you're cool with it, then do it, man. Yeah. Then go for it. Because you can be all in and you can be like, because the first chapter of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is don't try. And it's that art of wu wei, that effortless, just let go. And like, the more you force it, the more it runs away. And so if you can go into a situation and not be in that mindset, you're going to win.
Yep.
Yeah, you're going to win.
It's all a mindset. It really is. From the boxing ring to business, to mental health. It comes back to the mindset and what you tell yourself and what you believe about the things that you truly are capable of.
Right. Yeah. I mean, thank you for having this conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think that's such a cool thing for kids to just learn resilience, and just that fortitude to just be like, yep, like I'm going to get bullied. But like, I mean, that's like a sad thing to say. Like, and I wish you could eradicate bullying, but if we're going to like come from a standpoint of truth, you just got to, at some point, you just got to be like, all right, look, maybe we will, but not in this lifetime. And certainly not today. So like
it's more prevalent now. And so it's how are you going to stand up for yourself? I actually teach kids like certain poses, certain things, certain messaging to be able to stand up and to walk away to be on your own team. Yeah.
I teach self-defense to my kids and I just tell them, like, the first rule of self-defense is run away. Just walk away. don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Like it actually is fine. You know, we'll be okay. And it's going to suck and somebody's going to make fun of you. But like all of those things, but this is the worst. That's what I teach my kids. I'm like, this is the worst thing that happens when a bully comes up to you and you walk away. A bunch of kids are going to yell at you, say you're like, whatever. They're going to, whatever, you know what I mean? They're going to make fun of you, but like, that's it. That's the worst thing that's going to happen to you. And then what happens? You get to some place, the voices go away, you go by your friends, and then everything's fine. Like,
and you build more confidence in yourself.
I remember I learned that lesson in my first sales role. The guy, we had a brand new car salesman, and my sales manager, he was so scared. This salesman was so scared to ask any questions. And like, you know, you just have to like be out of your shell. And he was so scared. And so my sales manager set him up the worst. He just knew that this customer was going to lose their minds when they saw what he presented them. But my manager was like, no, it's great. They're going to love it. Go ahead. And the kid goes out there and starts talking to him. And they just freaked out. They just started yelling and like got up and ran. And they were like swearing at the kid. And he goes back. He's like, I don't know what happened. And he was so mortified. And my sales manager goes, you remember what just happened out there? He goes, obviously. And my sales manager goes, that's the worst thing that's ever going to happen to you in the history of your career. And then he goes, now brush it off.
And now go do it again.
And now go do it again. He's like, oh, that's the worst thing? Oh, okay. Well, I didn't die.
Yeah.
It was pretty ruthless, but I thought it was funny. But I actually became a really good salesman because he was like, oh, well, I can deal with that. Here you go.
Yep, absolutely. So
that's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate
thank you. I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah. Where can everybody follow you, find you, get your book, all that good stuff?
All right. So you follow me on Instagram at The Hope Hero or at Rise with Elysia. And then our website is thehopehero.com. You can pick up my book on Amazon. And then hopefully we'll be getting into some of your schools here soon with some resilience coaching and truly making a difference to help your kids and empower them to become heroes of their own stories.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Elysia.